Fios is not cable. We're wired differently, which means you can get the fastest internet available with equal upload and download speeds from 50 to 500 megs. So you can upload 200 photos before your favorite song is finished. Click the ad and switch to Fios today to get our best offer ever.
This is a download from BFM 89.9, the business station.
Good morning, Dodge. Regarding the Paris attack, how do you think this will affect the markets?
Well, good morning, Ibrahim, excuse me. Just the initial shock of the attacks may challenge extremely leveraged plays. I think that obviously the market's going to head downside. We're already seeing that in Europe. We expect that over here in the U.S. And based on our experience with other similar events in the past over the last 10 years, we suspect that the market will start to the downside, then sometime during the first day or two, there will be a counter-trend rally, but when you get into days 2, 3, 4, et cetera, you're going to have continued downside pressure. Now, that is just based on the news itself. When you get beyond that, you can see that terrorism aside, global security markets remain caught between the tangible economic weakness on one hand, and then we have the potential central bank monetary policy changes on the other hand. So it's going to be really volatile, and what happened in Paris over the weekend will just add to that volatility. The other thing is it may change the perception of the market of the likelihood of the Fed starting to raise interest rates in December.
When we talk about terrorism, there's always this talk about policy. The Democrats just had a debate over the weekend. How do you think this will shape, how do you think the terrorism agenda will shape the campaign of both Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders?
Well, we haven't gotten to Bernie Sanders by himself. We still have a few others that don't have the same history, either positive or negative, with regard to terrorism. It's too soon for terrorism by itself to shape the decision making of the public at this point. It does. I agree with you. Bernie Sanders would be the most likely name to be mentioned first, despite his standing up to now. But by the time that we get past this, I think we're going to see measures taken throughout the world that will start to counter more strongly the terrorist attacks that are happening. I mean, in France in particular, France continues to remain one of the centers because of its divided public, because it has fought jihadism across the world, and it has open territory, open boundaries at this point. So I'm not sure what the expectation is with regard to this particular attack. Yes, if there are further attacks and they happen in the United States, then yes, it becomes a much more serious issue, and those who do not have the positive history of dealing with terrorism will be sorely affected.
You were saying about tangible economic weakness and the possibility that the FOMC might have to rethink on their rate rise. Now, just last week, we were all very certain that December would be the date that FOMC raises their rates. How certain is it now, considering these attacks taking place over the weekend?
Yes, you're right. It's interesting because now the question has become, it's the emphasis that one hears when it's spoken about. It's no longer the certainty. The probability has gone from 60% down to 48%, 47%, and it probably will stay below 50% for at least the week until we can figure out what to do about terrorism in general and what the United States is going to do. And the perception of the difference between the economics of the United States and the political challenges of the world is going to become much, much bigger and much clearer, and it's going to have to be dealt with. So I suspect there will be more of a question about delaying.
The problem that we have faced throughout the whole year is weak commodity prices. Oil futures tumbled on Friday. This is perhaps the worst weekly decline in about 8 months. And we now know that France is now bombing Islamic State in Syria. How do you think this will affect the oil markets?
Well, several things. Now, number one, energy stocks have been reacting to changes in the price of crude oil, and that's turned down again. And technically, the charts appear to have run into very strong resistance slightly above where they are now. So the perception is that lower oil prices may be in the future, at least the short term.
Right.
And
But
I
how
believe
does...
that the
Sorry, go ahead.
But I believe that longer term, I think that there will be a reason for perhaps some more strength. Now, there's one other area that oil is going to be a major factor, and that is what does Putin do with regard to terrorism going forward? From what I understand, there are some reaching out of Russia and Putin in particular to see if there is a way that they can work with. They're trying to make it clear they won't insist on holding on to Assad as Syria's leader and demonstrating some kind of openness to one of the West Central demands. So I suspect there will be more of a reason to find a political solution with the West on the issue of Syria, caused by what's happening with regard to Paris and also the need for more oil exports.
Let's focus a little bit about the retail business. U.S. stocks actually faced a little bit pressure because of the earnings from beaten up retail sector. Companies like Gap, Target, Home Depot will all be talked about, Walmart as well. How do you think this will affect consumer sentiment, not just in U.S., but also Europe as well?
Yes, you've hit on something that's a very serious concern, particularly since it's happening before Black Friday. And we suspect, and what we're seeing is that those the analysts that are coming out now are so varied, from Macquarie to Citibank to Cowen, and they're showing and confirming that there's real weakness in the retail area. And this is going into the most important period of the year with regard to sales. So I suspect that this is going to create some weakness in our markets. I suspect that the weakness in retail is serious, particularly on the real estate side. Now, when you get to Amazon and Google and those who don't need the retail space, we're seeing a slightly different story. But even those areas are showing weakness in terms of the stock market. In terms of China,
with weak retail and also weak inflation rates, do you think this will affect heavily on how the FOMC view the interest rate hike?
Yes, absolutely. They may. I think what's going to happen is if they decide that they better not, for whatever reasons necessary, they will start to look for reasons to support a further delay, and this could be one of those reasons.
Let's talk a little bit about Myanmar. How do you think this will shape this region, on top of the fact that they did win, the NLD did win with a considerable margin? How will this shape the region outlook on the markets?
I think it will be positive for the markets. I also think it will be positive for the population as a whole. I think the win is very, very clear-cut. And it really harkens back to some of the basic principles of democracy and capitalism. And so I suspect that if we can get through the shorter period where there's questions as to ultimately who the ultimate leader will be, I think that there will be the path towards a freer country will be much clearer, and I think that will lead to further economic strength as well.
I know you don't own a crystal ball, but if you could just share with us one or two of your estimates on what are the things that we can look out for the entire week this week.
In terms of this week, we're looking for short opportunities, particularly in the retail area, particularly when you combine retail with some of the big cap stocks. We suspect that there's going to be weakness. And also, one of the things that's going to come up this week is the question that investors are going to have to come up with some kind of answer or approach to, and that is, yes, stocks are going to do very well longer term, but we are potentially going into a period where there will be more of a pullback, and so what would be the reason for buying stocks now rather than waiting to get through to the other side of some of the geopolitical risks that we're seeing? So I suspect that there's going to be more weakness. The market itself is showing some internal weakness, and so we're going to have to work through that. So I suspect there's going to be more activity on the short side, and until it doesn't make money anymore, it will continue.
Thanks, Dodge. Have a great week ahead. That was DodgeODorland, Chief Investment Officer at Landor&Fuest Capital Managers in New York.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To find more great interviews, go to bfm.my or find us on iTunes. BFM 89.9, the business station.
This year, I will chew 117 number 2 pencils.
I will doodle 9 Staples notebooks to death.
When it comes to school supplies, it's guaranteed your kids will go through a lot.
I'll make a whole lot of paper airplanes.
I will lose my backpack.
That's why you get guaranteed savings for back to school at Staples.
I'll give away my last pen to Nathan in math class.
Get guaranteed savings at Staples, and right now, one subject notebooks for just a penny with a $5 purchase. Staples, that was easy. Valid on select SKUs while supplies last. Limit 6, ends 8/25/12.